Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Ruairi Walsh. Ruairi, how are things?
Great, Mark. Yeah, looking forward to the weekend, All Ireland semi-final weekend. So yeah, giddy as you could say, especially with your own county still involved with Clare there, and I know you've Limerick to cheer on and Galway, I suppose. So yeah, it really is, probably the highlight of the J weekend where you've got the four best teams coming together, and after that, then you're just left with the final two. So yeah, still hope in four counties anyway, and more hope in some than others. But yeah, you have to be looking forward to it.
No, absolutely, Rory. I think it'll be what I'm just hoping for are two excellent games, because I mean the quarterfinals did really flatter to deceive a bit, didn't it, Rory? In terms of Clare's win over Dublin, and also poor Offaly, really coming up against a very determined Cork challenge. So look, we'll have a look at the All Ireland semi-finals, and we'll also have a review of Limerick's minor All Ireland success last weekend. They bridged a 42-year gap to win the Irish Press Cup, pipping Tipperary at the post in TUS Gaelic grounds. I suppose, Rory, let's maybe start there in the Gaelic grounds. I was there myself, and to be fair, the balmy weather of last week really deteriorated badly in Limerick on Saturday. Very blustery conditions. It always was akin to a county final in October, the way the wind was blowing in Cardavan. I suppose get your thoughts here, Rory, on this Limerick 212-114 win over Tipperary.
I think the wind did wreak a bit of havoc, because it seems to be a cross breeze that was gusting up, and the players shooting wise just never really got to grips with it. And a lot of kind of wides you wouldn't expect from well within the scoring zone, ones that should be nailed on scores that were drifting wide, and it just kind of it gave a bit of nerviness, I think, to both teams when you're missing scores like that normally go over, and you could see it spread through both teams. And we've seen both teams hurl better during the championship, and finals can be nervy affairs. And look, it was their first time playing in front of a crowd. I think it was 12,500 there. So look, there's a lot of reasons why you're not going to get a classic in terms of quality, with, as you said, with the breeze, with the occasion. And hurling in particular, if you can hang in there as Limerick did and take your moments when they arise, you can, like, hurling is funny. You can win the game in the last couple of minutes. We've seen it happen in finals before, sometimes to Limerick's detriment, thinking back to the senior final against Offaly and so on. But in this case, it was Limerick who did the snatch and grab with, an injury time kind of bonanza, you could say, with the substitutes that came on, which we'll get into. But yeah, look, overall, I said, it wasn't a classic game. We've had better All Ireland minor finals, but that won't matter to Limerick. They hung in there, did what they had to do, and came away at the end of it with the trophy.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the opening half-wise, as you said, Rory, that wind was swirling. Depending on what side of the goals you were looking at, flags were very deceiving. Any ball that was up in the air was getting taken by the wind. So, look, I seen match reports saying nervy shooting. I think, to be fair to the young guys that were involved here, it's an All-Ireland final at the end of the day, but the weather conditions certainly didn't help. From a Limerick perspective, they hung in there, as you say. And Tipperary kind of set the gauntlet out straight away. Chris Dunn, he's been superb in this championship, got the ball in throw-in and soloed all the way into the 30-metre line. Jack Roach, pivotal block, and then went down the other end of the pitch for Dermot Crowe from Doon to score. But I felt in that first half, Rory, particularly, Tipperary seemed to be the more dangerous of the two forward lines, movement-wise, and also trying to create goal chances as well. And from a Limerick perspective, after kind of an even Steven first quarter, second quarter certainly was with Tipperary. And I think the Tipperary fans that I was sitting alongside, 6 points heading into that dressing room at halftime would have been the least that they deserved.
Yeah, and look, Limerick got that goal, sucker punch for Tipperary, just before half-time from the Shane Waters, from the penalty. And it gave Limerick that lifeline, because, as you said, Tipperary took over in that second quarter. Conal Morrison, he got some classic scores inside, and Tip were the first team to really settle, It took kind of all the time. You could just see, like, Xavier Nelligan and Jack Roach were just trying their hardest at midfield, like getting on a bit of ball, sometimes a bit wasteful with it. But just that energy wasn't replicated throughout the field, and it was Tip that looked... Tip at that stage, watching the game, you could only see one winner until that goal went in, and you sensed, hold on now, that's just what Limerick needed. And will they come out all guns blazing start to the second half? Turned out that isn't what happened. Then we had a real nervy second half where Tipperary threatened at times to pull away. I thought at times they went for goals, Mark, when they were forcing them, rather than just stretching that scoreboard out to 6-7 points. They kind of went for that, the jugular a bit too early at times, or at times when it wasn't on. And then, of course, we had that grandstand finish with the introduction of Gavin O'Brien, brother of Shane O'Brien, as we know. And then John Ross O'Reilly with a superb score. Like, they scored 1-2 between them, the two subs, and that was in the space of 5 minutes, and it really swung the game. And Tip were just left to rue those chances they had missed, and not just the wides, but as we mentioned, the shots at goal, which weren't really on. And yeah, Sam Collins, and let's not forget, in the round robin, Sam Collins had a couple of mistakes against Tipperary, that kind of cost Limerick that day, and it shows some, all credit to him, because he was absolutely superb for Limerick, and not just he saves, but he's puck outs. And sometimes the young lads can go back into their shell if they make a couple of mistakes in a game, but he was superb, I thought. And just as well, there was the likes of Sam Mitchell, a cornerback. Just kind of, I remember he'd one very important hook at times, and it kept Limerick in touch, just that kind of last-ditch defending, last-ditch goalkeeping. And they were in that position then where if a goal came, they kept within that touching distance that, momentum could swing. And it swung when Tip had no time to recover in the injury time, as we said. Yeah, all credit to Limerick, and all credit to the bounce they got off the bench. And you'd have to say hats off to Diarmuid Mullins. He's had great success with underage teams in Limerick. And we've spoken before, it isn't always about All Ireland's either. Just getting these guys to this stage, the more games they play, the more they develop. I couldn't believe it was 42 years, because Limerick have had a lot of success at under 21 and level, up until recently. And we spoke at the start of the year how Limerick really needed a big year underage. For the last 4 or 5 years, they hadn't been competing in, let's say, even Munster finals, let alone at All Ireland level. So it is a real shot in the arm to Limerick underage hurling to get this. And and as I said, just hats off. And it's a great sign of management, Mark, where you can see from the start of the year that they were just slowly getting better game after game. And I thought they had their best performance against Galway, of course, in semi-final, where they were outstanding that day. And maybe they didn't deliver their best performance in the final, but as I said, you just had the belief built up by the improvements they had made throughout the season to, take that chance when they got it right at the death.
No, absolutely, Rory. And I mean, look, the first 15-20 minutes, I thought Limerick, they did have the aid of the breeze. Sam Collins was directed to launch high, long into Dermot Ryan, and also Shane Walters as well, who had a very good game. I thought his resiliency was fairly key as well. He missed a few chances, but was looking for leadership role, looking to take on the next shot. But I think about 20 minutes in, there was a subtle change in tactic, and it was quite apparent to myself and a few guys that were in the crowd that Tipperary were giving an awful lot of space away between the half-back line of Limerick and the Tipperary half-back line, and really required maybe a Xavier Nelligan and a Jack Roach to really start linking play a little bit, running through the lines. And I think that was the setup for the Limerick penalty as well, and they continued that in the second half as well. Maybe all to the great success until eventually young O'Brien gets the goal at the end. But I thought Limerick and Diarmuid Mullins and the management, they did kind of tweak the tactic ever so slightly. Saying that here, Rory, look, I think it's a phenomenal news story, I think, for the underage development program within Limerick. I think we've been on this podcast and the under-20s have really massively disappointed in recent years, and I really needed a bit of a bounce. And the fact that Diarmuid Mullins management and players of Limerick have really taken on the mantle from a slow start to building the momentum, getting into a Munster final. And I thought the All-Ireland series as well here, Rory, did them no harm at all. They had a very impressive win on reflection against Clare, a very good Clare side in that All-Ireland quarter-final. That fed into the All-Ireland semi-final in Ennis against Galway, which I was at, and I was very impressed, particularly with Xavier Nelligan, and also Jack Roach. And so it proved again at the weekend that they looked very battle-hardened. I'm not saying that was the same for Tip, but I think you could see the togetherness of Limerick, particularly in the All-Ireland series, really came to the fore, as you said. But I mean, from a Tipperary perspective here, Rory, I think hard lessons will need to be learned. And I think, look, to James Woodlock and the management, they were going for 3 in a row. And I mean, they were tantalising, 45 seconds away from achieving that. But I mean, some hard lessons, I suppose, particularly on the shot selection and the wides, and really knowing that the scoreboard is king at the end of the day.
Yeah, look, hard lessons, as you said, Mark, but overall, they're a superb minor team, and of all counties, Tip are consistently producing strong minor under-20 teams year on year. Also, Harty Cup teams, as we know, so Tip are definitely getting something right underage, and, might be a template for other counties to follow, but yet again, produced a really top minor team. And look, on their day, they could easily have won this, as we pointed out. You could argue that they had enough done to win it, just didn't take those crucial chances and left Limerick in the game. So look, I think when Tipperary reflect on it, like remember, these are still like at under 17, even coming down the year from traditional minor under 18, it becomes a bit even more about development. You could just see that this year with the going back to Clare under 20s, who had won the All Ireland minor 3 years ago. I think only 7 or 8 of that All Ireland minor team started for Clare, particularly in the first round anyway against Waterford. We're just kind of, I was a bit astonished at the turnover of players in that 2 or 3 years from an All Ireland winning team, let's say. So it just shows, that guys at this age are far from the finished article. And, but Tipperary are just producing players of a certain quality year and year and year. And I know they had a dismal defence of their All Ireland senior crown, but definitely the conveyor belt is there for Tipperary. And yeah, they just need to get that, I suppose, coming from under 20 level to senior, just get that transition right from, turning under 20s into senior hurlers. I know they've already done that with a couple of guys to great success, but just to keep the conveyor belt coming through.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's several players that really stood out for me in this championship. Highly impressed by Collins in the cornerback position. I thought he was a very classy player. Oisin Kennedy as well for Newport has an awful lot of upside, I think, in wing back, a big unit. He can only improve. James Finn as well had great moments. Look, Aina Tucker has delivered in this championship, maybe one of his quieter days in the final. But then look, Chris Dunn showed his class, particularly on the goal, midway through the second half or first half. There was no doubt when he got the ball that it was only going in one way and it was in the back of the net. Likes of Connor Kennedy as well, really impressed me, 2 points as well. Zach O'Keefe, Morrison, KJ Dunn as well. So look, we've named about 7 or 8 guys here, Rory, and I mean, you're looking at the under-20s as well that narrowly got picked by Clare. There's no fear of Tipperary here. I think the talent pool is immense, and I think it's just for James Woodlock, Brendan Cummins here to start, kind of the integration, the handover here of minors into the under-20s and really managing the pathway successfully here because, as you say, Rory, it's a massive talent pool for Tipperary to really look at moving forward as the seniors probably get into more transition mode.
Yeah, it is. Look, and it's a big gap, that 3-year gap, and counties have to manage that correctly. You don't want to lose talent, and you have to look out for late developers as well, guys that, for whatever reason aren't bursting into the minor squad, but by the 18, 19, they're there, so it's important to keep the development lines open and that there's still a lot of scouting going on in counties because you have lads going off to college as well. That's another factor, coming at very soon after minor, like probably around at 18, 19 years of age, going on to 20, and just important to keep tabs on players and checking their development and not miss those, as I mentioned, those guys that maybe weren't in the development squad scene but are now pushing it after that as well. But overall, as we said, Tipperary be happy. Limerick, look, a great job to get like nobody after a round or two of Munster, nobody would have seen Limerick as All Ireland champions. And as I said, hats off to Jeremy Mullins. He's a secondary school principal there in Doyle, and I think a lot of it, I'm training the local club minor team at under 17, and a lot of it is psychology with lads that age. And I'd say secondary school principal knows exactly what that age group, how to get them motivated. And yeah, look, he did a great job in fairness, and his backroom team as well.
No, absolutely. And look, I think as well, we've already called it out. Sam Collins had a terrific game. Had a great championship overall. Was very impressed by his physicality and also, as you said, his distribution. Again, like some Mitchell Collins and the cornerback didn't really give much away in terms of the cornerback. William Ryan as well from Boher, really stood to his task very well. I did like Hennessy, a wing back as well for Limerick. I think he's going to be an absolute find moving forward. But again, I think the likes of Xavier Nelligan here, I think is an absolute godsend for Limerick here, particularly in the middle third moving forward. And he's still underage next year. Jack Roach, Shane Walters as well. And again, the likes of Dermot Crowe actually did show very well, particularly in that first half when Limerick needed scores. And obviously when you had the likes of Gavin O'Brien coming on and also O'Reilly as well, who I thought was very sharp coming on. I thought the bench was the highlight here, was summed it up. And I mean, from a Tipperary perspective, they only used 2 subs during the 60 minutes when it's quite apparent to me that a few of the middle third were actually starting to tire with about 40-45 minutes gone. So I think maybe Woodlock and management, if they're going to do retrospective, trust their bench a little bit more here, get some fresh bodies in and really drive it home. But again, overall, it was an exciting final. May not have been the highest of quality, but I think that was due to the weather conditions. Heartiest congratulations to Limerick here and commiserations to Tipperary, who'll live to fight another day. I suppose, Rory, we'll move on. As you say, an exciting weekend ahead. The two All Ireland senior hurling semi finals up for decision in HQ in Croke Park, starting on Saturday with a fascinating encounter here between Cork and Galway. I mean, Galway winning Leinster very convincingly against Dublin. Cork dusting themselves down after the Munster final loss to Limerick, producing a pretty decisive display against Offaly, one would say. I suppose get your thoughts on the game and what are the talking points leading into it.
Yeah, look, I suppose out of the four teams going into semi-finals, I figure Galway are probably going in there in the best spot in terms of like, they're coming in there as massive underdogs based on what Cork have done recently. But Galway seem to me to be in a very good place. And I know it is hard to judge with the Munster-Leinster comparisons, but even go back to the league, remember that performance they had against Limerick where a traditional Galway team, and even in just the last couple of years, if they're down 11, 12 points, they fold, but they didn't. There was a bit of grit. There was something a bit different about Galway this year. And, they came roaring back into the game in the second half. And, it kind of made me stand up taking a bit of notice. And we were kind of saying the proof is in the pudding for Galway. They have to deliver in championship. And so far, I think they've been really impressive. There's massive competition for places in the forwards. Like it's changing nearly every week and in a good way because, you've Tom Monaghan couldn't break into the team at the start. He shot the lights out the last day. Conor Whelan had a very slow start to championship. I thought he was incredible against Dublin in the Leinster final as well. So there's massive competition for places. We've looked at the likes of Neary breaking into the team, Rabbit, Nyland. Like there is, this is a young forward line, a real kind of buzz about them, and they're full of confidence at the minute. And I think they're very dangerous, Galway, based on that. What have they played in terms of absolute quality? I think we saw from, the performance of Dublin in the All Ireland quarter-final that maybe that Galway 429 to, what was it in the end, to 415, yeah, kind of a couple of cancellation goals for Dublin. But, maybe that game, that result wasn't, does the form line hold, let's say, with Dublin's subsequent performance against Clare? So, look, that's the only question marks about Galway. If they were a bit more, if they had gotten to All Ireland final or produced big performances at the All Ireland stage in the last couple of years, you'd be a lot more confident about them. So there is an element of doubt, but overall, we can only go on what we've seen, and I think they've been really impressive. And I do like the mix that Donoghue has got. The likes of like Dahi Burks, again, the steel he adds to the team when he's playing at the back, and just the aerial power as well he has. Mix in with the Manions and the way the use of Cathal Mannion this year, get your best striker the ball, delivering the ball seems to be the mantra of what they're doing. So the forwards are getting quality ball every time Mannion is delivering it. And I'm sure that's something that Cork are going to look at because Dublin gave him the freedom of Croke Park and Cork are going to try and shut him down. And I wonder, is Micheál Donoghue already anticipating that? And has he something up his sleeve with the use of Cathal Mannion the next day? So look, lots of fascinating things. But from a Galway point of view, I think they're the team under the four coming in, first of all, in form, written off. They have a confidence, there's an energy about them. And I don't think Galway have a fear of Cork either. Like certain teams who have Cork have put to the sword in recent times, have this fear, if Cork get ahead of them, that they're in trouble. Whereas I think Galway, the fact that they haven't really crossed swords with Cork, of late, and when they have met them over the last 10, 15 years in qualifiers and so on, they've always seemed to shove it up to Cork and have turned them over more often than not. So I think it's set for a fascinating game Saturday evening, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah, to be fair to Galway, I mean, take the loss aside from Dublin, which I think was maybe a good reality check for Galway in a sense. Just the performance levels had dipped a little bit after the Kilkenny opening round. It did seem up here where I'm based in Galway that there was an awful lot of hype heading into that Kilkenny opening round game in Salthill that duly delivered. And then they had some flat performances, particularly, I suppose, for 40 minutes against Offaly. It was a bit underwhelming. Kildare away, they had an appalling opening 20 minutes. They pulled it back, won well. But then the Dublin performance where Dublin pulled the full forward line bench impact to full effect to win by 4 points. So I think Micheál O'Donoghue and management would have basically assessed that. I suppose, Rory, from a Galway perspective here, I mean, you're looking at the score spreads and it's pretty evenly spread. I mean, likes of Aaron Nyland has had 33 points so far this year. Tom Monaghan, as you said, the emergence of him can't be understated here with 24. Conor Whelan, Conor Cooney, Rory Burke from More Mary as well chipping in. So they're all within the 10% of the percentage of team scores here. Nicely balanced. I suppose for Galway to win on Saturday night here, Rory, how are they going to beat Cork, I suppose?
The first thing, Mark, is you have to deal with the main threats of Cork, and that is Brian Hayes in the full forward line and Barrett in the half forward line. Like, they are the two main guys. Like, when Barrett gets running and gets into space, which he has often done in Croke Park as well, it's harder to shut him down there. He does create gaps and creates problems with his running. He's direct running through the lines. And then, of course, Brian Hayes, just that threat in the air. And just like overall in the last couple of years, Brian Hayes, the improvement in his touch and his striking, and he just has that cleverness. Like, we see him take these goals at like a little one-handed half strike. Just he's so calm in possession in around the goals. He's just a finisher. And look, I think they have to deal with those threats. You'd have to assume that Dahi Burke will pick up Brian Hayes and try and nullify that aerial threat. Look, easier said than done. And, with Shane Barrett, I think they're better off just man-mark him, do what Limerick do, give him no space, try and completely shut him down. Then you also have Fitzgibbon, though, as well, who can be just as threatening as Shane Barrett. And, like, he's been coming off, the break he had with his appendicitis. So he's going to be fresh coming in there as well a bit, with a point to prove, I suppose, as well, after being missing for... I know he played against Offaly, but this is going to be the real test on Saturday evening. So yeah, look, that's from a Galway point of view. They have to shut down Cork's threats, but at the same time, they have to impose themselves. And we mentioned Galway's forwards; they really have to, step up now on Saturday and ask questions of the Cork backline, because there is still this doubt about, for me, Cork full backline. And I know Cahalane has done well coming in since Joyce unfortunately had his cruciate injury, but there's still that question. I just thought at times when Hegarty went in there in the Munster final, just for that last 10-15 minutes, he looked really shaky in there. And I just think Galway should really, attack that area and see what joy they can get from their own full forward line.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And I think for Galway to win here, I think the middle third work rate has to be absolutely savage from minute 1 to minute 70 here. And if they have to clear bench to actually keep that work rate going, because, I mean, it's ultimately to supply a ball into this full forward line, which is going to be quite intriguing here, Rory. If you take into account Alan Connolly, Brian Hayes, Shane Barrett and William Buckley, they contribute 64% of Cork's scores so far. The case study is there for all to see. Tipperary last year really did execute the perfect game plan against Cork. And what I would be fascinated about from a Cork perspective here, Rory, is if Galway's tactics do work a charm, does Ben O'Connor management have a plan B here that they can switch to maybe change it up a little bit?
Yeah, I think that has been one of the heaviest criticisms coming out of last year's final. That it was as if Cork didn't put themselves in Tipperary shoes and say, what are Tip going to bring? And then, try and adjust from there, because that would, the Galway could bring something a bit different at the weekend. And look, it might pose problems for Cork. And at that stage, Cork need to have a plan B and need to adjust because, look, it didn't happen last year. So, yeah, I think you're right there, Mark. Like, you at the minute, you get really punished if you're not flexible in how you play and not being able to maybe switch up position, switch up tactics slightly during the game and based on what the opposition are doing. So there has to be a bit of flexibility, but also, sticking to what you're doing yourself. But and Cork's, as we know, just they have that long option and the running game. Like, they have both threats, which makes them, the All Ireland contenders that they are, really, I suppose. But again, there is a question mark over that Freddie at the back, and also as well, just if Galway really shove it up to them, there is huge pressure on Cork, more so than anyone, because if you think about it, in the other semi-final, Limerick and Clare have both won All Irelands recently. Cork are the team with this 21-year kind of famine, and a massive famine considering the strength of Cork hurling, the amount of club teams they can pick from. They've basically 4 counties to pick from in terms of selection, if you know what I mean. And even underage, they are divided into 4 separate counties. So look, the longer this famine goes on, it's actually, if somebody told you back in 2005 Cork wouldn't win a senior All Ireland for 21 years, you'd think they were mad. But that's where we are, and every year I think that pressure ramps up more considering the players they have at the minute. Just wonder, if things go wrong early, or if Cork get dealt a hammer blow with 10 minutes to go, let's say a black card penalty or something, will they have the resilience to turn things around or hang in there? So the jury is still out on both those questions for me: the full back line, and also Cork's resilience in the biggest pressure of all. And this would be it if they're Galway asks serious questions of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, Tiernan Killeen here and Keane Daniels may have a huge role to play here. picking their moments to support the attack, but also defensively, particularly if Cathal Mannion will be roving around trying to be a playmaker to really make themselves available here to orchestrate. Do a bit like what Xavier Nelligan and Jack Roach did for the Limerick Miners, and really trying to orchestrate in that middle third a bit of a run game, because I do feel here that this Galway team, particularly half forward line, if they're given space, will absolutely exploit. Hopefully Rory Burke is actually fit to start, because he's a phenomenal talent and he does have the pace to burn here and really create a bit of space inside for like Conor Whelan, who's been reinvigorated this season, and along with Conor Cooney as well. And also, if the game opens up, you do have Tom Monaghan here that can chip in with 6-7 points from play very easy.
Interesting, you mentioned the two boys there, Keane Daniels and Tiernan Killeen. Like, they have to work their socks off. Sometimes for me, I think Killeen can, maybe shoot when he shouldn't, like from kind of low percentage areas. Like, they have to be completely unselfish in what they're doing and just give that quality of ball in, like work hard to win it and then use it really well, because I think every bit of possession Galway win at midfield is going to be vital. They can't afford to have poor delivery inside, because Cork are so good at working the ball out through Mark Coleman and so on that, generally even turnovers inside in Cork's half, like end up, you're in trouble behind you then in the full back line. Cork are so good, as I said, at working ball out and setting up chances for their own forward line. So I think it's just set up to be, for me anyway, I think it's going to be a classic. I see Galway delivering a huge performance. I do. I actually think Micheál Donoghue is very shrewd in what he's done so far this year. He got the best out of Galway in 2017. He's now, I think, got the right mix. And you mentioned Conor Whelan and even Conor Cooney being a bit reinvigorated this year. And I think that's because of the young lads coming in have given them that kind of, buzz and belief. Like, they're looking at the talent that has now burst into the team, and they're thinking, this is a great chance for us to not just get to a final, but maybe win another All Ireland here, which what we have in the dressing room. But again, not to go back to it, that question is, what have they really played in the championship this year? Leinster Championship seems to have been really poor. Galway seem to be really, really good, but the championship they're playing in, as you can see from Offaly showing against Cork, seems to be way off what we've the standard in Munster. So can Galway bridge that gap in a one-off game? Of course they can. Where are both teams coming from is the question. We'll know on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I think we will. And I think, look, Galway got the reality check saying the Offaly performance, if you stay 3 to 4 yards back from Cork, they will absolutely destroy you. Thought the Offaly tactics, let's be frank, in Thurles bordered on the naive, and I thought it was just a disappointing performance overall from Offaly. But it did give a timely reminder to Micheál Donoghue and the Galway players and what not to do in Croke Park on Saturday. They have to go for it. Go from the first ball on and really lead by example here. I think they will. Like, both these teams deliver absolute fantastic games down through the years. I don't think there's any fear between the two counties. I think there's a healthy respect, yes, but I don't think Galway are going into this game with any big trepidation here of Cork, and vice versa. So it does lend itself, and if weather conditions, I think, are going to hold on Saturday, I think this is going to be an absolute classic, as you say, Rory. But I think an awful lot will be decided upon maybe in the bench impact that comes on as well. Like, Cork have been criticised, particularly the management, for not using their sub bench during the championship. But I feel this weekend it may need to happen sooner rather than later. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And also, like, I think the fact, Adam Walsh's performance against Offaly, the last time when he started, I just thought, like, he's such a threat in the air. It does offer, like, our Cork going to go with, like, Connolly with the three big threats in the air, let's say Connolly, Hayes and Adam Walsh inside there, like that would, but offer, I like William Buckley though. I think, he adds another kind of, let's say a real live wire kind of guy to the full forward line as well. And sometimes, cornerbacks they're not used to marking a guy like that all the time. And I just think, like we're saying, like Alan Walsh, he got 2-1 in the first few minutes, the last like two, like almost carbon copies of goals. Just the high ball in, if they have the three aerial threats in there, like it is pretty similar one way. Like we saw how Galway dealt with Dublin's aerial threat of Heatherton, but that was only one man in there. It would have just offered a different test. And we know they struggled against Dublin in Salt Hill when you had Ronan Hayes in there as well. So I wonder, will Cork look back at that game more so and see, can they hurt Galway? Maybe that's why they did start Alan Walsh against Offaly inside, or just, have that other option in the air in there. But for me, if it was me, I would be starting William Buckley in there. But Walsh is a serious viable option off the bench. And you kind of wonder why, some of these lads weren't used against Limerick in the Munster final, because we spoke about how Ben O'Connor, really didn't really trust in his bench that day. But I think, giving guys a bit more game time, and I know Hugh O'Connor as well, he got a start in to the last day. I think he's got more minutes into guys, and I think he'd probably be a bit more confident in his bench, and he's going to have to be coming on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think William Buckley's an absolute find this year, and look, he finds pockets of space like any good player will. He seems to have time on the ball, and look, I think it's hard to not have him in there, but I think Alan Walsh has done his chances no harm at all, if needed, to come off the bench early, 45 minutes in, to change it up a little bit. Particularly in open play. Again, Barry Walsh, I think, has been a little bit subdued, particularly in the Munster final, but I'm expecting a big performance off him as well, particularly on his run game. Particularly if Shane Barrett, there's plans for him. I think Barry Walsh and Dermot Healy, particularly in that wing forward positions for Cork, are going to have to play a pivotal role, particularly in the run game. I suppose, Rory, all that aside, who do you fancy getting to the All Ireland final on July 19th?
Okay, look, I think the whole hurling championship has been going along the script of, even from the league, Cork and Limerick going to meet 5 times. I just see, if there's going to be an upset the weekend, I think it's Galway, and I am going to go with Galway delivering what from outsiders. We'd see it as a massive shock. I know they probably don't see it that way in their camp at the minute, but I'm going to go with Galway causing a massive upset in the whole Limerick v Cork 5-time, whatever they were calling it. But I just see Galway turning Cork over for the reasons we outlined. I just think that the Galway forwards, and I do think Galway have the better bench here, believe it or not, as well, with Dave, that mix of experience and youth coming in off the bench. And I just see if Cork are in trouble, they have faltered in the past, like this team, and until they do otherwise, you'd have to see until they can prove that under immense pressure and that they can get through tight situations, like let's say the All Ireland final last year when they capitulated, and there was other games last year as well, like that game up in Ennis where they're up 13 points and capitulated. Cork have all the quality to win the All Ireland. They have the experience now as well. They have the hardship. They have everything going for them. But I just think they could be caught on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's an intriguing one for me, and I think Galway have an awful lot to prove on Saturday. I do think this Leinster form line is very suspect, given what we've seen of Leinster. And maybe it's an unfair representation for Galway, given how Dublin and Offaly performed in All Ireland quarter final. But I certainly think with Galway, they are going to put it up to Cork, particularly in the 70 minutes. I think there's a bit of unfinished business for this Galway team, particularly the manner of their All Ireland semi-final loss to Limerick a few years ago. It badly stung an awful lot of Galway supporters up there. A great 25 minutes against Limerick, when on another day Galway could have been 7-8 points up, didn't capitalise, and then Limerick gradually came away with a very comfortable win. I think this Galway team is built a little bit different this time. Whether it's good enough on Saturday is another story entirely, but I think we'll know an awful lot more about this Cork outfit, particularly defensively. And I'm wondering here as well, Rory, in terms of Galway, really testing Patrick Collins' puck-out distribution, because I think the big threats are going to be nullified here from Galway. So Patrick Collins is going to have to be laser sharp in terms of his distribution. I'm just going to go marginally with Cork, just based on their probably insightful forward threat. They will get an awful lot supplied ball, particularly in that second half. But as I say, I don't see a Cork Limerick All Ireland final here, and maybe in a few minutes' time, I'll give you the verdict of what I think of Clare Limerick. But I do sense that there is an upset here. I don't think the media predicting a Cork Limerick is a bit premature here. I think there's an awful lot of hurling to be done. I'll just marginally give it to Cork, but I'm expecting, and I think an awful lot of people here in Galway are expecting a big performance of this hurling team. And I think the bench has been more battle hardened for Galway than Cork will. And if that is the case, then look, small margins here, Rory. It may be the difference on Saturday, and I may be going in into extra time here for these two guys.
We haven't really had like to be honest, we haven't had a real close game, this year. I know a couple at like the round robins were slightly, a bit disappointing, and I know the Munster final came down to end, but it wasn't a classic Munster final. Like I think probably the best game was the Cork Limerick game back at the start of the Munster Championship. So we could do with a real rip-roaring game. Football's been stealing all the headlines of late. So I think two big hurling matches at the weekend, not just in Ireland but in the world.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I think for Galway to win as well, bench impact. And when I mean bench impact, I know it's the familiar faces like the Connor Coonies, but I think the likes of Gavin Lee here from Clarenbridge, likes of John Flemings who may not start, coming in after 40, 45 minutes and leaving it all out there, because I think Gavin Lee has an awful lot of pace here in that half back line to really kind of help Galway massively into that defensive side of the house. So, look, all in all, I think it's going to be a fabulous game. And I suppose it leads up then to Sunday at 4 p.m. The old Midwest rivals here, Rory, do battle again, Limerick and Clare. And I mean, let's look at it from a Clare perspective here, Rory. I mean, we spoke to Liam Walsh here 2 weeks ago, and I know you were very up and down. You weren't quite sure what Clare team turned up, but you have to be pleased in terms of a knockout game in Thurles and just the manner of the performance of Clare. They looked a different side to the one that produced the performance in Cork.
They did. Look, they started the game really well, looked really sharp, had some lovely link play, got some great scores. Didn't seem to go away from the way they were playing, like where they were, 1-2s and third man runs. They went away from that and kind of started going really direct on Duggan. But I didn't think there was a need to do that. Kind of went a bit stale for a while, and Dublin came back into the game. And let's not remember, had it back to a point just early in the second half. And in fairness to Clare, they found another gear again and pushed on. But the worrying thing, Mark, coming out of that game was the injuries. Like Davy Mack looked like a serious ankle injury. Haven't heard anything back since. Conor Cleary looked a concussion coming off. Looked very groggy. He's in a situation where he's still having symptoms like of concussion. Like he's a non-runner for Sunday, and I just think the two of them, that's your full-back and centre-back. Now, I know Cleary ended up out at wing-back following Chris Crummy, who'd Dublin threw at wing-forward and didn't start Heatherton. But, like, you're looking at what would have been the full-back and centre-back against Limerick, like the spine of your back line gone. And I just think that might be too much of a blow for Clare if the two boys are gone. Well, Davy Mack, I think, is definitely gone, and no one seems to know what the story is with Cleary. But, yeah, look, that's kind of the main thing coming out. Look, performance was an improvement in some of the performance we saw. Still, though, Mark, at times, we talked about them being up and down. They had some really poor spells, like that 15 minutes before halftime. We were dreadful in those 15 minutes. And then for pockets of the second half, we went up and down as well. But look, it was overall improved performance. We spoke about Clare's record in Thurles. They delivered again with another win. But like, this is a different kettle of fish playing a Limerick team who really look to be back to their best this year. And it's going to take, I don't know, everything to win this. It's very hard to see it. And the gas thing is, like, out in Clare, like, there's zero talk about this game. It's so weird. Like, the All Ireland semi-final, zero hype, and all the hype seems to be in Limerick, and it's almost like All Ireland final fever, and getting off vibes from some people inside. Like, so maybe that's Clare's only hope is Limerick maybe taking Clare a bit too lightly. I know a lot of their fans are, and a lot of the local media, and I'm sure Caroline Curran has had a really tough job for the last 3 or 4 weeks, trying not to let that seep into the players. But look, that's and it is a factor in amateur sport. Like, these guys are meeting the public every day. They're at work. They're not sheltered from it. So look, she does have a tough job in it. But like, Limerick are so seasoned now, like, that you'd be very surprised if they come out with a complacent performance, especially against local rivals Clare. And they just seem to be in a better place than Clare all year, Mark. And it would be a massive turn-up, I think, if Clare beat Limerick on Sunday.
Yeah, like, we can switch it over to Limerick in a little bit, but I think for Clare, revel in the Crow Park surroundings here, Rory. They've had a good record as of late. Don't need to remind you in terms of the All-Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny and Cork winning the All-Ireland. Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, these guys revel in Crow Park, and particularly with the backdrop of that round-robin fixture in Ennis. I think the Clare players have a point to prove against Limerick as well, given that 15-point loss, because that came from absolutely nowhere. I didn't expect that as a Limerick hurling fan, and being a Limerick hurling fan, I'm just a little bit wary. I sense, there's injuries.
You're being too wary, Mark.
I know. It does make me a little bit wary, though, of Clare, though, because I do think there is a bit of a kick in this Clare team for Sunday. There has to be, really.
Well, look, you said it there. Our threat is our forward line. Like, we have serious forwards, probably our best forwards we've ever had in terms of a team of 6 forwards, or even if you want to go 7-8. Like, there is serious talent there. I think our issue is at the other end, Mark. We are, like, wide open the back. And that game in Ennis, like, look, at the time, I was buoyant going into it as well. And I thought, Limerick might have been in decline. It was early in the championship, and they were after that game in Cork where they had played with 14 men, and there was a lot of signs saying, okay, this is the day for Clare. But the way we were set up, Mark, we were wide open at the back end. Like Limerick just ran in through gaps of oceans of space. And here's the thing: if Clare have not learned from that, and I think we've been slow to take learnings from games, particularly over the last 2 years. I know we had a brilliant All Ireland campaign 2 years ago, but since then, we've been very slow to learn from matches, particularly with our setup of our backline. And if we go out again with a similar setup, there's only going to be one winner on Sunday. We cannot be wide open at the back and expect to win this game. We have to be a bit smarter in how we defend and close that space in front of, the likes of Gillane, Aidan O'Connor, Peter Casey. And then, just really closing that space that Limerick forwards operate in. So, look, does it mean employing a sweeper there? I would for the start of it, and make sure we don't hang in the game, let's say, at the start, and hope our forwards at the other end can shoot the lights out, which they have the potential to do. But there's a lot of ifs there. And also just the personnel in the back line. You are going to be down 2 major players, and Conor Cleary would definitely be probably picking up Gillane again. Would he have been fully fit? If he is fully fit, it's a massive boost to Clare, but how much training will he have done in the last 2 weeks? That's another factor as well. But yeah, no, you are right. Look, we have threats at the other end. And I suppose, look, in terms, they won't lack for motivation. I suppose just reading and listening to some national media stuff, it's been incredibly, I suppose, disrespectful to a team that were champions 2 years ago. This thing of Cork and Limerick are way ahead of everyone else. Whatever about Limerick, Limerick have won 5 All Irelands. They deserve to be mentioned in that breath, but Cork haven't won in 21 years. And we just recently won All Ireland under 20. And to just be dismissed like that, I'm sure it is, Clare will not want for motivation, but wanting for motivation and going out and beating this Limerick team the way they're playing are 2 completely different things. So look, it's going to be a real tall order for Clare. There is hope. There's always hope. And as you said, the Croke Park factor. But we have to get our backline right, Mark, or we're not beating any of the other 3 teams left in the campaign unless we, get our setup right at the back, get our matchups right, and close that space in front of our full forward, in front of the opposition full forward line.
No, I'd agree with you there, Rory. And I think it's been pretty quiet in that Clare camp ever since the Dublin win, to be fair. And I think that bodes well. I think management have taken stock, particularly in that Cusack Park round robin loss as well. Definitely Conlon's basically sitting in as a bit of a sweeper, orchestrating playmaking. That requires 1 or 2 of the wing forwards to come back here a little bit and counter-attack, then so be it. But I mean, Limerick have come into the championship. They came in an opening round loss to Cork. They were on the back foot heading into that Clare match, got the win. But Rory, the one thing I've noticed with this Limerick performance, there has been good flashes of play, but there has been periods here in these games where they've had lulls. I think that might be a source of optimism here for Clare, particularly. I'm just thinking in terms of the Tipperary result. There was a bit of a lull in that second, third quarter. Waterford hung on to Limerick for 60 minutes. And then obviously you had the Clare game, where that third quarter particularly, Limerick weren't really pulling up trees, and it really required just Clare maybe to score a quick goal there to maybe invigorate. So there has been consistency issues for Limerick. Definitely scoring accuracy has been an issue for them. I think they were only 51, 52% in the Munster final. I know they stepped it up against Clare and Ennis with a 78% percentage, but there has been kind of that low 50s is not going to get the job done on Sunday against Clare and Croke Park.
Yeah, look, and I suppose the difference in those percentages, Mark, was the pressure the Limerick forwards were under against Cork as opposed to what they were under up in Ennis that day when Clare just stood off them. But look, you are right. There are lulls, and in Ennis, Clare was so poor themselves, they didn't take advantage of that lull that happened. In the Munster final, Limerick had a lull maybe about 10 minutes before half-time where Cork hit 4 in a row, and then Nicky Quaid produced an unbelievable save. Yeah. And that kind of momentum swung back, and Limerick got a couple of really important points just before half-time. So there have definitely been lulls. Clare need to take advantage when Limerick do, drop. And I suppose if you're trying to look for positives or hope for Clare, Limerick last 2 performances in Croke Park, their backline, were opened up by Dublin last year and by Cork the previous year. They have been in trouble up there, so Limerick need to kind of work on making sure that their backline aren't kind of exposed for pace issues or whatever it is, and Clare need to try and look at what Cork did, look at what Dublin did, and see where they can find, areas they can hurt Limerick. Now, as you mentioned, they have the weapons to do so, but Limerick are just, I don't know, for me, Mark, Limerick, when they're at their best so far in the championship this year, have been better than any other county. When they've hit form in those games, like they've had stunning spells of hurling. Even go back to that first game against Cork, where they came out of the blocks 100 miles an hour until that sloppy goal they gave away kind of swung momentum a bit back. They've had some, really good spells, like the way they blitzed Waterford in the finish of the game. But there, as you said, there was a lot in that game where I think Waterford scoring spree in midway through the first half. Again, so look, there is no team is unbeatable. Yeah, there is hope for Clare, definitely, but it's just really hard to see it. And I'm usually so optimistic, but I don't know. I'm just filled with a small bit of pessimism going into this. They won't want some of these great lads who could be their last game. We don't know what Shane O'Donnell's story is career-wise. John Conlon still in there, for one last, and the efforts he's made to come back this year. Tony Kelly, like these guys are all the wrong side of 30. Duggan, like is there one last big kick in Clare? You're kind of hoping there is, but it's only a hope. There's, based on all form and what's happened to Clare when they've met Cork and Limerick this year, and albeit the Cork game, Clare were already into the All Ireland series. Yeah, you can only see one winner for me anyway, and I just see Limerick having too much for Clare.
Yeah, like it's a fascinating game for me, even more fascinating than the Saturday one for me, because for Limerick to win this match on Sunday, the young prospects have to really deliver. And look, you can talk all you want about the senior leaders that really came to the fore in that Munster final, particularly the last 10 minutes. When Kylie and Kinnerk were forced to basically put Gearóid Hegarty up top full forward to break ball and really cause chaos in that Cork full backline that Peter Casey plundered and benefited from. But it did mask issues, and it's particularly around the likes of the young guns. Aidan O'Connor had a difficult afternoon on the freeze, was a very peripheral figure, particularly in open play. Shane O'Brien looked threatening in the opening half, but then definitely subsided. And also Adam English as well. So I think for Limerick to win here, these three guys are definitely going to have to step it up, particularly in the All-Ireland semi-final, particularly against Clare. But also, I think just a point to prove as well. I think Aaron Gallan as well being taken off in that Munster hurling final. It'd be fascinating just to see his performance. Given that, surely there's a bit of a bit of a reaction there from the Patrick Swell talisman as well. So, look, all bets aside here, Rory. What's the heart saying to you right now in terms of the All Ireland semi final on Sunday?
Oh, well, the heart is saying there's hope there, but a lot has to go right for Clare. The biggest question mark for me, can our backs hold up? And even if we did what Cork did in the Munster final, as you said, shut down Aaron Gallan, limit Shane O'Brien, limit Aidan O'Connor from play, those kind of things. If Clare can do that, they're in with a great chance. But I don't know, based on the way our backline have been playing and the injuries we have to our backline, it's just hard to see us managing to do that, despite the threat we have at the other end of the field. So is there hope? There is, but the head is actually saying that I think this one is going to be one too far for Clare. And I just hope, that we are competitive in terms of that we give it a real, and it comes right down to the end. But even then, I'm just seeing it as maybe a 5 to 6 points for Limerick, despite our best efforts. And I hope I'm wrong, but that's the way I'm seeing it at the minute, Mark.
I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit closer. It's just, I think these two games hopefully are absolute classics here, by the way. I think for Limerick, there is some baggage from the last two performances in Croke Park. I think Caroline Currid in the last few weeks has going to be pivotal, because there is going to be memories of Croke Park, particularly that Dublin performance last year was so well below par. And then you had the Cork All-Ireland semi-final win. That is probably a template for Clare, particularly how the middle third of Cork really did create the space inside for Cork to really kind of hammer home that win. I think for Limerick here, it's pure and simple, right down the middle, starting from Nicky Quaid. Central positions have to dominate. And if they can start like they have been starting in the championship, getting a fast start, getting a few points in front, it'll be just very interesting to see the Clare reaction. It'll be very interesting to see the team news here, Rory, as well. We do wish David Reedy all the best. Same with Conor Cleary, like there were nasty knocks, and also David McInerney, just to see what's the personnel that Clare have. But I think Clare go into this game with an awful lot of pressure on Limerick. Same with Galway here as well. I think these are the intriguing subplots for Galway and Clare particularly. The pressure's not really on them. All the media have basically pinned Cork Limerick All Ireland final. And if you had been reading Ring Matten's withdrawal from the FAI Senior Cup to Bohemians, they cited July 19th as the reason for that. So I think, to be perfectly fair, there's plenty of material here for Galway and also Clare to really kind of hammer it home here. To me, I'm just going to shade at Limerick only just, but I think, Rory, this is going to be far closer. I think Limerick are going to be asked questions here from this Clare side. And I would not be surprised here. As I said, if there's one shock here, I think it's coming on Sunday. And it's not on Saturday. I think the shock might come from Clare upsetting Limerick, because I think an awful lot of people have it that Limerick...
My God, I hope you're right.
Yeah, because I think safest houses bet is probably Limerick playing Clare and beating them, given the personnel issues, the injuries that might have to happen from a Clare perspective. But adversity brings on triumph here, I think, Rory. I think the Clare side will be galvanised if that happens. I really do.
One other thing, Mark, just as well, like, if you like Limerick play a certain way, you know, and they have these patterns of play, like we see how they use Barry Nash, you know, coming off and creating space, running through midfield. Like, you can actually watch Limerick and see exactly what they do. Now, trying to stop what they do is the problem, because they're so good at it. But Clare are like, I was watching the Dublin game saying, what is our style of play? Because we were running off the shoulder, then we were going long. Like, they're very off the cuff. Like, Clare just play off the cuff, and that can be dangerous when it catches fire. So that is the only thing. Like I think Limerick, you can analyse and try and come up with a plan to stop it. Now, as I said, but Clare, it's hard to predict what they're going to do, because I don't think they know themselves what they're going to do. It is very, playing it as they see it at that moment, which can go badly wrong, but can also go right. But if we haven't watched the Barry Nash moves, which cost us up in Ennis twice, and we haven't copped onto that, and we haven't, somebody tracking those runs from deep from the backs, because he is the main guy to do it. Himself and Kyle Hayes are the only two really that will burst forward through lines. Like, they have to be watched and tracked. And, and then from our own point of view, I think Diarmuid Ryan has to defend, first of all. He's a defender, and not get caught up the field 50 yards away from his man. He needs to set up shop and defend. And if he gets a point or two, fair play to him from distance, that'll happen anyway. But not to go here and up the field looking for scores that aren't on and then getting turned over. So look, we need to get a lot right at the back ourselves. And even from the front, we have to stop these, patterns of play that Canucks Limerick so well tuned in at. But there are like patterns to do every game that, Clare need to cap onto at this stage. But look, as I said, Limerick do those things so well. They have that threat. As you mentioned, Gillan is going to be hopping inside now after being taken off the Munster final, kind of first Limerick player to be substituted. Yeah, look, I just see like Limerick have that threat up front, but also they're just a lot more solid at the back than we are at the minute. And that's what it'll probably come down to at the end, who can, shut down the opposition the best. And I think Limerick are in a better position to do that. So that's why I'm kind of favouring them and giving them that 5 to 6 round. But as you said, anything can happen, because with Clare, we just don't know they can do anything.
Yeah, no, I think, and even Liam Walsh on here, that set of 6 forwards for Clare, maybe a better 6 forwards in the country on fire. Tony Kelly will revel in it, Shane O'Donnell. I'm really being pro Clare here, because I really do think that this is a big...
You're trying to build this up, Mark. But
I am absolutely building you up, Rory, because I feel, look, as you said, they've been massively disrespected, and I think the round robin game in the Cusack Park is not an accurate reflection of where this Clare hurling team are. I think it's a big test for Brian Lohan, though, and management. Get the setup right. If they can get the setup right, they're giving the players a good opportunity here to really stake claim to an All-Ireland final. And I think, Rory, you'd agree, if the game's in the melting pot with 10 minutes to go, I think all bets are off here.
Yeah, look, it is. I just hope Clare are there with 10 minutes to go. And if they are, as you said, look, the advantage comes to Clare, because they're the team that are the underdogs, and they're, buoyant. And look, hopefully it will come to that, Mark. And hopefully, as you said, we're in for 2 classics, I hope. And it's up to Galway and Clare, really, to, based on what we've seen, to raise that standard, because they're the teams that have, there was this talk of 2 teams way ahead of the rest. So it's up to Galway and Clare to show that it isn't the case. And that you can only do your talking out in the pitch. So hopefully that will be the case at the weekend. And Absolutely. As I said, for about the 4th or 5th time, I am so looking forward to this weekend.
Oh, no, likewise. I think it's one of the sporting weekends of the year for me personally, same with you, Rory. I mean, these should be 2 brilliant games. I think the weather's going to be set fair in Dublin as well, Saturday and Sunday. Minimal breeze, so I think, look, there's no excuses for high-scoring games. Look, we wish all these 4 teams all the best, great spectacle. I think the only shame here, Rory, is then we're down to 1 game in the Senior All-Ireland hurling final on July 19th. But I suppose let the 2 best teams win, really, and those semi-finals. I suppose we'll leave it there, Rory. It's been a good one tonight. Many thanks for your time, contributions as always. I suppose next week we'll run the rule over these All Ireland Senior semi-finals, see where the winning and losing of the games were, and kind of maybe have a little sneak peek in terms of final thoughts before going into the big preview night. And also, there may be some inter-county news emerging next week as well. Until then, Rory, enjoy the weekend, enjoy Dublin, and yeah, we'll chat next week.
You too, Mark. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.